Let me show you how I healed my chronic Lyme infection and went from crushing fatigue and feeling like my body was falling apart to finally having my energy back and living a normal life again. This will definitely change your perspective on Lyme disease and help you understand how to go about it correctly. Okay, so before I share my story, let me say that none of this is medical advice and only my own experience. Also, I will not be talking about acute Lyme infection that obviously needs medical attention right away. What I am talking about is chronic Lyme disease, where the bacteria that cause it stayed in the body for years. This is also sometimes called late-stage Lyme disease and a very controversial diagnosis that people often get from their holistic practitioner or functional doctor, and when there isn't anything else to explain your symptoms. So if that applies to you, this video will be relatable, but you do also have a lot of doctors that call it nonsense. Decide for yourself. So with that being said, let me tell you my whole story. A few years ago, my health crashed from one day to the next. I went from feeling fine to feeling like my body just wasn't working anymore. The symptoms were very weird and all over the place. Headaches, fatigue, brain fog, strange aches that came and went. None of it really made sense. So I did what most people would do and went to the doctor. But after a few tests, they couldn't really find anything specific. So I then went down the medical rabbit hole and saw a bunch of specialists, tried all kinds of practitioners, and kept searching for answers. It was super frustrating because none of it was making sense. Eventually, one practitioner suggested testing for Lyme disease. Now, I didn't have any of the obvious signs of a current infection, but I had been bitten by ticks a lot as a kid. He told me that in some cases, the bacteria behind Lyme disease can linger in the body for years and then turn into the late-stage chronic Lyme that I talked about before. Now, the problem with this is that testing for it is very tricky. The bacteria can be hard to detect in standard blood tests, especially in the chronic stage. Some tests only look for antibodies, which might not be present if your immune system isn't reacting anymore. So you can have it and still test negative. There is also different types of tests with different sensitivities, and if one is negative, most people don't get another one that might be more reliable. This is why a lot of people either get misdiagnosed or go years without knowing that they have it. Because of these issues, my practitioner recommended doing a very sensitive follow-up test. This time, it did come back positive, and that was the first real answer that I had in months. Based on this, the next step was obviously treatment. I was prescribed a very specific antibiotic that was part of an antibiotic family that is often chosen for Lyme because it's lipid soluble. That means it can get into cells and the tissue where the bacteria like to hide. At first, I felt super hopeful, but within a few days, things took a really bad turn. I had severe allergic reactions to the medication, and it got bad enough that I ended up in the hospital. So obviously I had to stop taking it immediately. When I got out of the hospital, I had to make a choice. Either I would try a different antibiotic or focus on treating my other symptoms first. At the time, my headaches were by far the worst symptom, and they were so debilitating that it was pretty much ruining my life. So together with my doctor, we decided to put the Lyme treatment on hold because I didn't have signs of an active infection, and the idea was to just address the most pressing symptoms first and then come back to the Lyme later if it needed. So months went by and I just kept working on symptom relief. Then by chance, I stumbled on an article that completely changed my perspective on this condition. It made one very important point that I still remember today. The bacteria behind Lyme disease, so the Borrelia bacteria, are opportunistic. They cause the most trouble in people who already have low energy, poor immune function, or some other underlying weakness. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. So many people get bitten by ticks every year and might even be exposed to Lyme, but they never get sick. Why? Because their bodies keep it in check. It reminded me a lot of how herpes behaves, not in the medical sense, but in the way that it flares up when you're stressed or when your immune system is already low. But then it stays quiet for when you're healthy and strong. And that was the point where it clicked for me. Instead of trying to eliminate every last bacterium in my body, I should instead focus on making my body strong enough to handle it on its own. So that's basically what I did. With that mindset, I started building my recovery protocol. It wasn't about finding a magic bullet anymore, but about making small changes that would add up over time. It basically focused on 3 main parts and was the result of all the information and the things that I'd learned over the months that I was researching. Number 1 was active relaxation. This was the foundation because my nervous system was completely overworked and stuck in a constant state of stress. I knew that if I didn't calm it down, my body would never have the energy to heal. So for me, this meant daily guided meditations and active relaxation. So dedicated time slots where I would focus on calming my mind and body. So I started treating rest as a non-negotiable part of my recovery, not something that I would do when I had time. Especially in the beginning, this was easier said than done because my mind was always racing, and because all these symptoms came from one day to the next, I was still very much afraid of having some undiagnosed illness that was slowly wearing me down. The second pillar was nutrition. I was already eating pretty healthy even before I crashed, but I did make some changes to my diet and supplements that definitely matter. So for example, I tested for nutrient deficiencies and then worked on correcting them. I also found out that I had low magnesium, which is very important for nerve function and energy production. I learned that I had signs of copper toxicity, which can throw off the balance with the zinc and also affect your immune function. And I also learned that I had a severe electrolyte imbalance. So from then on, my diet was more of a targeted approach to fix these things instead of just eating healthy. If all of this is new to you, definitely check out the description where I linked related videos that you can click through. The last pillar then was detoxification, and this happened over time after my nutrition and nervous system were already in a better place. I focused especially on bioflow and liver function because that's how your body eliminates most environmental toxins. On top of that, sauna also definitely helped, especially with old infections, and I'm sure it also supported my Lyme disease recovery. I use a near-infrared sauna, which penetrates deeper into tissue and is also better for sensitive people like me who don't like the extreme heat of a regular sauna. Again, I know that for complete beginners, this is a lot of information to digest. So please take your time with this and don't jump into crazy protocols right away. You don't have to do everything at once, and the most important thing is to understand the idea behind this. So indirectly getting rid of the infection by strengthening your overall body and immunity. This approach is about improving multiple areas at once. So by improving my nutrition, I was supporting my immune system and giving my body the raw materials it needed to heal. By calming my nervous system, I was giving my body the signal that was safe to shift into repair mode. And by eliminating toxins, I was removing the obstacles that were slowing down my recovery. Once I did this, over time something incredible happened. My symptoms just started disappearing. The headaches became rare instead of constant, my energy came back, I could think clearly again, and the chronic Lyme that was supposed to be a lifelong struggle, it just kind of faded and hasn't bothered me since. Of course, I don't know how much of my fatigue and my weird symptoms back then was caused by the Borrelia bacteria and how much was the nutritional depletion, stress, and all the other things I had going on. But looking back at it now, probably the most important thing I did was that I worked on making myself a bad host for the infection. So this is less about the specific Lyme bacteria and more about the terrain of my body. If the terrain is strong and resilient, the infection has nowhere to go. But if it is weak, then that's when problems start coming up. And unfortunately, many people only focus on the chronic Lyme disease diagnosis that is very vague to begin with, and then they lose themselves in protocols that only try to eliminate that specific bacteria without doing anything else. Now, you can definitely still do these protocols. For example, there's research showing that certain essential oils and herbs are helpful to kill off Lyme bacteria in vitro studies. So I'm not saying you shouldn't try these, but always make them part of a bigger program that also increases your overall health and resilience. Otherwise, you probably won't make much of a difference in the long term, because you might get rid of the Lyme infection, but then you catch something else and get knocked down again. So if you've tried a lot of things and none of them really worked, hopefully this video helped you shift your perspective a little and gave you a better idea on what to focus on for long-term improvements. Again, all the related material will be in the description for you to get more info on this.